What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Canadian Football Fantasy Fix for Week 6 of the 2021 CFL season. I'm Ryan Coop here with your Friday depth chart update. Week 6 kicks off tonight between the Hamilton Tiger Cats and the Toronto Argonauts and gets the week underway, and then a triple header on Saturday. So we, for the first time this season, have all of the depth charts out before any of the games begin, which means there's a lot of room for you to make roster decisions for the whole week today already. I generally, lock in a lineup to start with and then tinker as the games go along. Maybe, if I didn't get as many points as I thought in the earlier games, I take a bigger risk to try to get back in it later in the week. But you have the full info now already, so let's go through it team by team. And starting off with tonight's game, let's take a look at the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Biggest notable change for the Ticats this week is no Brandon Banks. Banks seemed to have suffered a couple big hits in that game against Toronto last week. He's not ready to go this week, so Pappy White steps in and will slot in at slot back for his second start of the year. The Ticats rolling with Dane Evans at quarterback. Still no Jeremiah Mazzoli. He's still out on the injured list, and while he wouldn't start anyways, it would be Evans. At running back, Sean Thomas Erlington as the starter. Jackson Bennett and Malik Irons listed as the backup. So Don Jackson out of the backup role again this week. And at wide receiver, Stephen Dunbar Jr., Jalen Acklin, Tim White, Pappy White, and David Unger III. So still a couple guys on the 6-game list there as well, and Braylon Addison, Devere Posey. I like Jalen Acklin, and I really like the pick of Tim White this week. I think he's had a solid 3 games that he's played so far, and he's been getting more production in each and every one. And look out now, Tim White, Brandon Banks' targets have to go somewhere. And I think he could have himself a monster day for the Ticats. Defensively, not too many changes. Most of it is intact. The only notable, no Ciante Evans at defensive back. So the Ticats will be without one of their top defensive backs this week. Looking at the Argos side of things, after getting pulled in the last week's game, Nick Arbuckle is back as the starter again. To me, this is the right decision. I think you can't keep flip-flopping back and forth. He had one bad game on Labor Day where the Argos always struggle, and I think he is still the better quarterback for this team and should be the starter. So he gets another chance this week to bounce back. He does get Ricky Collins Jr. back in the lineup. He missed last game after being on COVID protocol list, but he'll be without Daniel Braverman. Kick returner, wide receiver, is out this week due to injury. He was one of my top value play projections. A mix of the job he does in the return game plus getting a couple targets at a very cheap salary. Braverman is generally a good play, but he is out of the lineup this week. Dejon Brissett will get a start in his place. And Chandler Worthy gets back into the lineup as a backup for the first time since rejoining the team. He was released about a month ago, then was just recently brought back onto the practice roster and now gets into the backup role on offense. Nothing else too notably changing offensively or defensively for the Toronto Argonauts. Levi Noel is out. He's been a backup in every game this season. They'll be without offensive lineman Philip Blake this week. And defensive back Krizan Butler, but Arjen Colquhoun will step in at defensive back as well. Looking at the Bombers and Riders on Saturday, one of the 3 games that day. For the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, a lot is the same as the week before. The offense, in fact, is exactly the same. Still no Naaman Roosevelt. So they will roll with Zach Collaros at quarterback, Andrew Harris at running back, Darvin Adams, Rasheed Bailey, Kenny Lawler, Drew Wolotarski, and Nick Dembski as the receivers, and Charles Nelson at kick returner. The only semi-notable changes for the Bombers is Jontrell Rockmore gets back into the lineup after missing the past month due to injury. He had a good first game or two on the year, so we'll see how he factors in there. And Noah Hallett will come out for him. And the Bombers choosing to go with 9 defensive linemen for the second week in a row, which on the game day roster, which is something you really do not see too often in the CFL. Taking a look at the Saskatchewan side of things, number of notable changes from the game last week. Most notably on defense, defensive backs Lucas Purifoy and Ed Gainey are out this week due to injury. And defensive lineman, it was announced earlier today, AC Leonard suspended for the next 2 games for failing to provide a drug sample for the drug testing policies. So AC Leonard gets suspended. That's one of the best pass rushers that the Riders have. And that's a big piece they're missing there on the defensive line, and a couple big pieces at defensive back. Look for the Bombers to try to take advantage of those this week. At wide receiver, Jordan Williams-Lambert is out this week and not quite ready to go. He had himself, I believe, 9 targets last week, 5 catches. So look for those to be spread around to the other receivers. Keon Schaefer-Baker gets the start in his place. He started a couple weeks ago, he got into the backup role a couple weeks ago and, had a good performance in that time. He was a backup last week again. He gets a chance to start this week for the Riders. They'll be rolling with Cody Fajardo at quarterback, William Powell at running back, Schaefer-Baker, Ricardo Lewis, Braden Lenius, Kyron Moore, and Mitchell Picton at wide receiver. Expect Kyron Moore to be the most targeted guy there again, but I think they will try to spread the ball around maybe a little bit more than they did the week before to some of the more value picks like Braden Lenius or Mitchell Picton. And for the second straight week, it looks like Jamal Morrow is the backup running back and will be presumably handling kick return duties for the Riders. It's hard to tell sometimes because some teams put the returner on the depth chart and some don't. That's a little, small petition from me. Please, every team, put your return guy on the depth chart. That would be great. Thank you. I appreciate it. But I assume it's Jamal Morrow. He had a solid week last week, and he'll be handling the kicks again this week. And with Lucas Purifoy out, he won't be taking any away from Jamal Morrow. Getting into the Battle of Alberta rematch, let's start with the Edmonton Elks. They are getting a number of pieces back from COVID protocol. There were a couple guys that just weren't quite ready to go last week. They are back in the lineup now. Grimes at defensive back, Bieria at middle linebacker, and Tavon Smith at wide receiver, who will slot in as a backup this week. Wide receiver Shai Ross steps back into a starting role. He was listed as a backup last week, but because of some of the ratio issues they're facing right now in Edmonton, he needs to slot back in as a starter, which means Jalen Tolliver, who got the start last week, falls to the backup position behind him. No Terry Williams this week, so they'll need someone else handling return duties, and that's going to be Ernest Edwards, who also gets in for his second straight start. Still no Armonte Edwards for the Elks. They'll line up with Trevor Harris at quarterback, James Wilder Jr. at running back, Darrell Walker, Greg Ellingson, Shai Ross, Ernest Edwards, and Mike Jones as the starter at wide receiver. And there's a lot of great options there. And I don't know if you can go wrong with too many of them. I think there's some great big-name receivers in Darrell Walker and Greg Ellingson. I like Walker a little more at a cheaper price point. And I think there's some good middle-priced option in Mike Jones and some really good value plays in Shai Ross and Ernest Edwards. Especially, Edwards had a big game with around 14 points last week, and now if he's handling full return duties on top of that, I kind of like that as a good value play this week. That vaults him up to one of my top value plays for this week at wide receiver. Taking a look at the Calgary side of things, Bo Levi Mitchell is back as the starter after missing just 3 games with a broken fibula, which is absolutely insane to me. I couldn't imagine, I sprain a finger, I'm probably out for a month, 2 months. Never mind coming back off a broken fibula and playing a professional football game. So Bo Levi Mitchell is back. That means Jake Mayer slots back into the backup role. Unfortunately, that means one of the best value plays at quarterback is now no longer an option, but Bo gets the start. We'll see how he performs in his first game back. He'll have the usual list of wide receivers available to him. Josh Huff, Markeith Ambles, Kamar Jordan, Richie Sindani, and Herji Mayala. I would expect the rotation of Huff, Ambles, and Jordan to be the three go-to receivers there again, as they have been all season. And Kadeem Carey will start at running back once again with Ante Milanovic-Litre as the backup. The other notable for the Stampeders is wide receiver kick returner Malik Henry is out this week, and I believe he's on the 6-game injured list. They do not list on the depth chart who the return guy will be, but last game, Josh Huff did take 4 or 5 returns himself. And, he's already one of my top locks at wide receiver because he's been putting up valuable point totals for you for 3 weeks in a row. Now, if you add return duties onto that as well as the primary returner, I love Josh Huff as a pick this week. He is one of the receivers, I'll tell you right now, I have locked into my own lineup. Then finally getting into the final game of the week, the Ottawa Red Blacks and the BC Lions, the only game that's not a rematch from the week before. Ottawa will have a new quarterback under center as well. Dom Davis gets the start after coming in the second quarter last week and putting up a very fine day with 25 fantasy points in just 3 quarters. You couldn't ask for much of better from Dominic Davis. He gets the start at quarterback over Matt Nichols. Timothy Flanders is back from injury and will start at running back, while Justin Davis, who filled in for him for a couple weeks, is now out. And the big missing piece this week for the Red Blacks is no Devontae Dedmon, which makes me kind of sad because I love watching Devontae Dedmon play. He's one of my favorite players in the league. He missed practice all week. He will not be ready to go. So taking his starting spot at wide receiver is Anthony Coombs, who has been out the first couple of weeks. He is healthy. He is ready to go, and he will get his first start, I believe, of the year at wide receiver. And I'm interested to see how they use Coombs because, he's a guy that can kind of play running back, can kind of play wide receiver. Paul LaPolice likes his creative offenses. Will we see some little bit of trickery or different packages with Anthony Coombs, much like kind of Nick Dembski gets used in Winnipeg? I'm interested to see how he performs there, but I'm not so sure I'm slotting him in my lineup necessarily this week until I see his usage. And with no Dedmon at kick returner, Ryan Davis will handle the return duties. He comes in at $2,500, still is one of the top value plays each and every week, and is definitely boosts his point total a little bit, knowing he's handling the full return duties for Ottawa. And then finally, looking at the Lions, they will be without 2 of their starting wide receivers, Lamar Durant and Dominic Rhymes, both out due to injury this week, which means Javon Catoy and Keon Hatcher will replace them and start on offense. I really, really like Javon Catoy at $4,058 in fantasy this week. He put up a 20-point performance against Ottawa 2 weeks ago when those guys went down due to injury and he came in. You've got Brian Burnham and Lucky Whitehead as probably the 2 go-to targets ahead of him. And then you've got Catoy, who in 2019 had himself some very good games when he was a starter with this team. So I'm high on him at that price point. I think he's a great option to put in your lineup this week, given that he's starting and given the missing pieces for the Lions. They'll also get one of their top offensive linemen back in Joel Figueroa this week, which is a nice add there. Should keep quarterback Michael Riley upright a little bit more and help him find those receivers. The Lions going with Riley at quarterback. Still marked on the depth chart as questionable as he has been for the last couple of weeks, but unless something's changed over the bye week, I don't see any reason he doesn't start. Shaq Cooper at running back, Whitehead, Burnham, Catoy, Hatcher, and Shaq Johnson at wide receiver, with Chris Rainey handling the kick return duties. So those are your depth chart updates for this week. Number of notable changes, notable guys that we talk about week in and week out that are no longer in the lineup due to injury or other this week. So make sure Make sure you adjust your lineups accordingly if you've already set them, and take advantage of some of those matchups now with teams like the Riders missing a couple big pieces on defense. Do you maybe lean a little more on the Bombers offensively? That's something I'm considering as well, and certainly taking advantage of some guys that are now adding extra return duties on top of their regular receiving duties. So that's it for the Week 6 CFL Fantasy Preview. Make sure you get your lineup set. And as always, best of luck to you in this upcoming week. I hope you hit at least 100 points, and I hope we see you at the top of the overall fantasy leaderboard for the week. As always, do all the YouTube things. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't. If you have any fantasy questions while you're trying to set your lineup, put them in the comment section or tweet them at me. That's probably the better way to do it so I see it more on time. At CooperTrooper42 on Twitter is where you can find me there. The link's in the description as well. Tweet me if you have any fantasy questions, and I'll be happy to answer them for you to the best of my abilities. Good luck in week number 6. As always, thanks for watching. Have a good one. Take care. Bye.